From Tumwater, Washington, going out to the 5 counties and beyond. No Shh, it's the TRL Podcast. I'm Chris.
I'm Annalisa, and we are your hosts for the library podcast that talks about more than just books. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Annalisa.
How are you?
Super, how are you?
I'm good. What are we going to talk about today?
This may be the most important episode that we have done so far, not counting the first one. I suppose intellectual freedom and censorship, that's probably the most important topic we've covered. But today's episode is going to be about strategic planning. Sounds really super exciting, doesn't it?
It sounds vague a little bit, so maybe...
It's like a corporate buzzword, like synergy or objectives and key results, things like that. So, but it is actually super important. And it informs, the basis of how we do what we do. We talked about budgeting in one of the recent episodes, and the library's got a limited amount of money. So our strategic plan informs what we do and don't do with the limited resources that we have.
So who are we having on the podcast today?
We're bringing our board president on to talk about strategic planning, who's also the chair of the strategic planning committee.
And who's the other guest that's joining Mary Beth?
Our second guest is Sarah, who is one of our public experiences coordinators. And Sarah and I do a similar job. I'm also a coordinator when I'm not podcasting. And she's another member of the strategic planning committee and can provide some insight from within our public services department.
Well, I'm excited to get started.
Let's do it. All right, we're here with our two guests for our strategic planning discussion. We have Sarah, who is our public experiences coordinator, and Mary Beth Harrington, who is the TRL Board of Trustees president and the chair of the strategic planning committee. And you have a real life too as well. Do you want to explain what you do outside of those two roles?
Well, outside of those roles, I'm actually a nonprofit consultant. I've been doing that for about 30 years. So I help nonprofits develop their strategic plans. But I have a life beyond that. I started out in libraries as the director of volunteers at the Dallas Public Library. And I did that for a few years. And I was also executive director of the Austin Public Library.
Very cool.
Wow. In addition, I'm from Texas, so I worked with Texas Library Association, TSLAC, and the American Libraries Association on bridging the gap between libraries and the public. And in addition, I always tell people I'm not a librarian, but I gave the industry my firstborn. Our daughter is the outreach and instruction librarian at South Puget Sound Community College.
Well, then you should really qualify as a librarian, or at least, you're in the family.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we had cycled through all of the higher ranking library staff who could potentially impact our careers. But we hadn't. We invited our board president on, but that is a volunteer role, is it not? And a lot of people don't know that.
It is a volunteer role. And also, just so the staff can be reassured, the board only has one staff person that they supervise, which is the executive director of the library. So the rest of you, we do not have anything to do with.
So we don't have to fear you at all.
No, not at all.
Sarah, would you like to talk a little bit about what you do for the library?
So I am in charge of the celebration calendar. I am also get to work with our EDI advisory group that looks over policies and procedures for the many different parts of our organization and how we interact as an organization.
How are you involved in strategic planning?
Sure. So how am I involved in strategic planning? So one of my main parts is that I, as a coordinator, being able to connect with the strategic planning group, be part of the meetings, but also let staff know when I visit libraries or just in my general announcements, I'm on this committee. Do you have any feedback? Do you have any insights? Do you have any things that you're hearing from your community that you would like for us to know more about, so then I can help provide that link for that communication back to the strategic planning committee or to staff itself too. So being that a middle part, just like I imagine Chris may feel as times as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you've done some outside community engagement work with other groups in the Aberdeen, Grays Harbor area, correct? So you're
Yes.
coming to that with some additional experience.
Yes. So recently I've been able to be part of the Dialogue Project, which is so it's a project with the Dispute Resolution Center of Grace Harbor and Pacific Counties. And we have small group facilitations, and we've met in different towns within Grace Harbor. And what we're trying to learn is, what is it that, what do as a community, what do you see that you would need support with, or that you would like to know more about, or what could we as a community take on, and what are those needs? And so it's been really interesting, because a lot of the people that are attending these I have never met, and I was born and raised in Grace Harbor, moved away, and then came back, and so it's been really enlightening to hear what everyone else, what their priorities are. And then being able to see, once we get the community survey rolling, which is later on in the strategic plan, how do those correlate with what I'm hearing from our Grace Harbor folks? And then, of course, what are we hearing then from all of our counties that we serve as a district?
Thanks. We appreciate you both being here. Mm-hmm. Extensive background in community engagement and strategic planning.
Mm-hmm. I think we should start at the beginning, which is, what is strategic planning in the first place, and why is it important for organizations like TRL to have strategic plans?
Sure. Well, I can answer that because I do this quite a bit. So most businesses do some sort of strategic planning. It's a way for you to focus on things above and beyond your day-to-day activities. So goals that you want to do to move the mission forward. And it's critical because a lot of times for any organization, you can get focused on just doing the day-to-day activities and different things that you need to do to keep the organization operational. But a strategic plan is more aspirational. Mm-hmm. It's things that you want to do to change the community or support the community, or in above your day-to-day activities. So, for instance, for strategic plans, when I'm talking to organizations, a lot of times I'll say, so if I, for instance, said, I want to lose weight, and that's what I said, my chances of doing that would be probably pretty poor. However, if I said, I want to, by July 30th, I want to lose 25 pounds, and I'm going to do it by going to the gym, so many days a week, and eating less calories and doing all this stuff, my chances improve. Now, my personal chances are probably still pretty poor, but overall, your chances improve. And that's where a strategic plan comes in, is it basically takes, it breaks down the fundamental things that you want to achieve. Now, there was a time in the olden days when strategic plans were 10 years and they had massive multitudes of goals. And we've realized that nowadays strategic plans, less is more. And so what you're going to see is a strategic plan that's 3 to 5 years with 3 to 5 fundamental goals, because we find out that the less goals that are part of the strategic plan, the better chance you are that you're going to be successful with them.
Mm-hmm.
In preparation for this episode, I was looking at some of the plans that other organizations have available on their websites. And you see, I live in Lacey, the coolest of the cities in the Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater area. And they have a comprehensive plan that's, supposed to span 20 years, and it's hundreds and hundreds of pages long. And I looked at the city of Centralia, where I worked for Timberland in the past, and they have a strategic plan that runs from or comprehensive plan is what they call it, from 2018 to 2040, and it's like almost 250 pages. And even like other organizations that are similar to Timberland, like the Pacific Mountain Workforce Development Council, who we partner with, they have a strategic plan that's about 100 pages, and that runs 2024 to 2028 that they just recently drafted. So they can be like massive documents.
They can be if you have something that that's going to take like 10 years to achieve. So for instance, I'm working with an organization right now that's developing a 10-year strategic plan, because in 10 years they want to build a building, and it's going to take them 10 years to raise the funds and to find the architect and do everything that they need to. So yes, they can be huge. But most organizations now are going for the smaller plans. Again, I will say smaller, the goals are not necessarily small. The goals could be gigantic. Timberland could have a goal of ensuring that every child from 3 to 5 knows how to read. I mean, it could be a huge goal, but just the number of goals
packaged in a way that's a little easier to digest than going through 100 pages. Yeah.
And one other thing about the strategic plan is it is fundamentally the board's responsibility to ensure that you have a strategic plan. But the trick is it's not a to-do list for the staff, and that's kind of a surprise to most people. It is intended that everybody who's associated with Timberland looks at the strategic plan and finds their role in doing that. Now, the board, for instance, has different roles than the staff. But as a board, we should look at the strategic plan and say, oh, these are the things that we can fundamentally do to help the organization move forward and achieve a successful plan.
The current plan that we have that's kind of coming to an end, when was that plan drafted? How long was it originally?
So in 2019, it was a staff-led strategic plan. And we had conversations in small groups throughout the different communities in our 5 counties. And there was, so in person, online, and then there was a survey on our website. And from this input, then we had a staff member look through all of that data, comb through the data, and then find the 3 themes that we do have now as our 3 goals that we are currently working on before we transition to our next strategic plan.
And I got to be on that committee at the time too in 2018-19, and that plan was originally supposed to be a 3-year strategic plan, and then the pandemic happened in 2020, and so a lot of the plan that we had planned really became, kind of went out the window. Not went out the window necessarily, but you can't really operate the same way because there was a global pandemic. And it eventually turned into a 5-year strategic plan because the board, rather than try and draft a new strategic plan in the immediate aftermath or the midst of the pandemic, kind of extended the one that we were currently using. And so it became a 5-year strategic plan, and we're looking at another 5-year strategic plan now. And the work that was done in 2018, that was a staff-led committee. So in previous years, before my time at Timberland, we had done other strategic plans, and so, the way that these can be written is sometimes you can just do it in-house, and that's what we did in 2018. We had a committee, and it was staff and board members, and we did all the surveying ourselves. We did some community engagement activities where we went out into the communities and we invited folks in to talk to us and tell us what they wanted to see the library do, how we could partner with them. And we took all that feedback and we drafted our own strategic plan, basically, in-house. And this time around, we're working with a group of consultants, and we'll be talking to them a little bit. They'll be part of this episode. And that's, in my opinion, outsourcing some of that, the labor of designing the survey, make sure you're asking the right questions, make sure you're reaching the right groups. So I'll be interested to see kind of what comes out of that as we go through this cycle. I think the other thing I wanted to say about this too is that when you're reading those headings, what are some of the practical things that come out of each of those elements of our current strategic plan? And when you mention local communities, what has come out of that? Well, you can say that the expansion of our Anywhere mobile services has come out of that. In order to reach our local communities more effectively, we've established and expanded a mobile services operation. And so that's one sort of tangible thing that comes out of that. We look at birth to 5, we've increased our early learning programs and story times. If you look at EDI, we've started the monthly celebrations calendar, which you were talking about. We've increased our focus on diverse groups in our programming, and even on the back end in terms of hiring and retention, we've taken an EDI lens to that work as well. So there are these sort of tangible things that come out of that. I don't know if there's anything that comes to your mind that you would add to any of that.
Well, just the programming for children has increased immensely, I think, as a result of that, of doing, again, a focus specifically on that age group. And one thing about the strategic plans is that there are some organizations that spend a lot of time working on the strategic plan, and then it sort of goes into a file cabinet and is never heard from again. And I find that very annoying and totally inefficient, because you spend a lot of time really, really thinking about this. And so one of the things that I love that TRL does is that every single month in our executive director report, specifically states, these are the strategic plans, these are our goals of the strategic plan, and this is what we're doing to accomplish that. So that every single meeting, and all nonprofits should do this, is that every single meeting, if you have a strategic plan, you do a litmus test. It can be very, very quick. It's just kind of looking at it. I use red light, green light, yellow light, like where are you with your strategic plan? But it's something that you should be using every meeting or every month for your organization. I mean, it is a plan. You're supposed to be moving towards the successful completion of it. And like I said, too often it ends up dusty file cabinet.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why you want it to be clear what you're supposed to be doing. You want to have like actual established metrics, like you were saying, like we're going to do this and do this, and this is how we're going to get to this future goal that we have set, so that you can actually do that month to month. Because if it's too vague and broad, how do you measure your progress month to month?
Absolutely. So one of the questions I ask organizations, and I'm sure that our board and the strategic plan committee is going to be tired of me asking this, but the fundamental question is, when are you done? When are you done? So a lot of times when you're doing strategic plans, and there's a lot of different ways you can do one. One of the ones I use is called SMART. And that doesn't mean that you're trying to write a plan that is specific, measurable, accountable, time, all those things. I mean, you'll go nuts if you're trying to do that. But just one or two, like by December 31st, we're going to increase revenue, or we're going to increase circulation, or whatever it is, but something so that you can celebrate the success. Because too often I see nonprofits and organizations that come up with a goal like, we want to raise more money. Well, when are you done? You don't know when you're done. And also, one of the fundamental important parts of strategic planning is celebrating the success and being excited that you all accomplish this together.
What are some examples that you feel like we've been able to celebrate in Timberland in the past few years?
I think specifically the 3 to 5 goal, the first one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just the number of programs and the number of children that you see coming into Timberland, and just I think that's been really a dynamic shift from previous years. I wasn't here previously, but what I've seen in the last few years, and yes, definitely DEI has been incredible. Just really embracing everyone in our community, and really trying to make sure that everyone who walks through the doors feels comfortable and a part of the community. That has been fundamental.
An easy one that comes to mind for me, because we've done so many of these in the past few months and year or two, we do these kind of grand ribbon cuttings for our refreshed spaces or our expanded spaces. And a part of those has been these really enhanced children's areas, which I think really supports the current strategic direction of that Birth to 5, these spaces that really speak to them and make it a more exciting place for them to be. So, and that one's an easy one to celebrate because it's like a ribbon cutting and there's cake and stuff. So like a very obvious choice for a celebration. You kind of already touched on this, Mary Beth, how does strategic planning impact the mission, the vision, and values?
Well, in terms of mission, it's supposed to help you move forward on your mission. It doesn't take you into a different mission. It just helps you, like I said, focus on areas that you may not, that need a little bit more attention or a little bit more focus. You're still doing the day-to-day activities. You're still doing the work. Books are still checking out. But, for instance, if we were, and I'm not saying we're doing this, but if we were to have a goal that had a more focus on our senior community, for instance, then what you would see is that the book collection process would probably bump up in those areas. The programming would bump up in those areas. Some of our outreach to senior centers or retired communities would bump up in those areas. So it's basically just kind of doing your day-to-day work, but just enhancing it in certain areas. In terms of vision, vision is kind of a tricky thing, because for an organization, a vision is an unattainable goal. Right. Like, for instance, for TRL, our vision could quite simply be to ensure that every single person understands fundamentally why the library is essential to the community and uses it. Now, I will say that a large portion of our community understands, we hear this all the time, they understand why the library is important, and that's phenomenal. But not everybody uses the libraries. And so going back to the point about the strategic planning committee and utilizing an outside source, that was one of the reasons the board decided to do this, is because when you use internal folks, it's fantastic and it's great. And obviously it saves a lot of money. But the challenge with libraries, and coming from somebody who's worked with libraries, the challenge is that libraries, we usually are talking to the people who already love us.
Mm-hmm.
We want to talk to those people out there who haven't been to the library in 10 years and do not know that we have free printing and do not know that we have anywhere, do not have a clue what Anywhere Library is, or our extended access hours.
Yeah, have never heard of EAH. Don't know that we can do free faxing. We can still do that. So
Exactly. So there's a lot of people in the community that could be utilizing the library and just are not quite aware of everything we do. They still think we're just books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's really important too. I agree that I think part of that, because we love our super users, right? That they're amazing. Thank you, super users.
A lot of super users probably listening to the
Super
podcast.
users, this is another library term that not everybody
Yes.
uses. So a library super user is quite literally someone who is using the library a super lot of the time.
You got it.
Okay.
Yes. But in the strategic plan, what we're also, I think, hoping to arrive at is like what you were saying, like they may not know, or what are the barriers? Like what is the barrier, to not utilizing the library, and if we understand the barriers, maybe then we can understand how to support that need in our society or our community as well. So yeah, I agree with you. It's like that. I'm excited that that the decision was made to do an outside, just because I think having that outside perspective sometimes, and even seeing then what trickles out and like what forms out of that, and being able to like be part of this process and actually see the survey questions, knowing that like the survey questions will be translated into different languages, that it will be able to be print or online, asking that what are the barriers, or like if you knew about, and then having a check mark of like the different services, would be using the library be something that you're actually interested in and available to you?
Maybe you're not using the library just because you didn't realize that we had something that could be of use to you,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or the hours, with our EAH, knowing that like these hours on Sundays now are huge. I think, I know for me, for my family, knowing that I could go to our EAH libraries and use them, and that's available, has really revolutionized, I think, our use as a family to the library. So.
And I wanted to return to kind of a point you were making earlier about how the strategic plan informs where we spend our resources. We have obviously limited tax money, so we have to decide what we focus on. And your point about, if we decided to put more of our resources towards serving seniors, what that would look like. We're also not going to stop serving children birth to 5. We're not going to stop focusing on EDI or local communities just because we moved on to a new strategic plan. So like these elements of our current plan are going to remain important core aspects of what we do. But as we develop a new plan, if we hear from our community members about barriers that are preventing them from using the library, or maybe things that they weren't aware of, or areas where they'd like to see more investment from the library, we might change our plan and pivot to put more of our resources in a different area while these other things are still important. I think that's an important point that should be made.
Absolutely. We're just adding to the menu, so to speak.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And for me, I think being part of the strategic plan, I think as a someone that works for Timberland, it's been really fun to see the 3 different goals, of local communities, equity, diversity, inclusion, and children birth to 5 as a lens. Like everything I do, I feel like I look at local communities, that description, EDI, and then children, and I'm like, how is my work impacting these 3 goals? And that lens of being able to put that on, and it's been really wonderful.
It also helps the staff to figure out what they should do or what they can do or what areas that we should not be focusing on, because we have an incredibly excited, passionate, creative, use a lot of different adjectives to describe our staff. And they could be just trying to just do phenomenal things. And I think that's important. But again, what the strategic plan is, it provides a focus.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, we're going to focus on these areas right now and really bump this up and do tremendous things to support this area or to remove barriers. I love the term about that, because it is true, because we think that Timberlands, we have these 29 different locations. They're located all over the place. We have a lot of kiosks and different things like that. And we think that we're available to everybody. And that's probably not the case. And so it helps us focus on some areas that we maybe need to improve on, or just figure out a way to help people with access.
Yeah, we do tend to want to be all things to all people in this profession. So it's a nice love, like, oh, here's how to focus a little bit more. Yeah, it's a helping profession. Exactly. So we've talked a lot about kind of where we've been and what strategic plans are. Where are we in the current planning process for our next strategic plan?
We just finished our SWOT, or our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats activity. And from that, we have been able to the consultants have been able to brainstorm and create these great questions that, again, will be part of this survey that we're going to be sending out. It will be in print in multiple different languages, but also on the website. And then they've also, when I say they, the consultants have also been able to go to multiple of our branches and talk with both patrons and staff, just to kind of I think, hear from them. Like, what's going on? Mm-hmm. What are your dreams? What do you see as opportunities that, we're hearing from the community, or as community members, what are our opportunities? What are we doing well? And then I think, what could we be doing even better? Or, if there's a different focus, what would that look like? Mm-hmm. Or what's really important to you as a community member?
That will obviously be available on our website, newsletters. We'll be pushing that far and wide.
Mm-hmm. They're going to be showing up at some fairs and
doing some in-person stuff,
outreach activities, and just as just one thing to our audience: if you are listening to this, you should fill out the survey. We want everybody to fill out. Get your friends, get your family to fill it out, because again, the intention is that we really want to hear from everybody in the community. Everybody has a voice. Everybody has a reason to utilize the library, or needs to tell us what their reason is. And so we really want to encourage every single person who's listening to this podcast to encourage them to complete the survey.
I mean, you talked a little bit about why community feedback is so important. And I wonder if there's more to say there, which is, one of the things you said is figuring out what the barriers are. But just why is community feedback the most important thing right now?
So I think serving 5 different counties. And I think that's really special. That's an amazing opportunity for us. That being said, with this serving of these communities, we need to be able to hear from our, diverse population in these communities. And, like I talked about super users before, we want to, we want to hear from our super users. And we also want to hear from our community members that maybe didn't know we had a library in our town, or, have never stepped foot in the library. I guess in the service of our communities, we want to make sure that we are serving everyone, because we are, as a public entity, we want to be of best service and use those funds in a strategic way that we can best serve everyone. And what are those needs? And we'll never, we won't know unless we are able to have that communication to us. So I think that's going to be the most
well said. I mean,
survey.
Obviously our community members can always tell us how they feel about the library. I mean, even outside of the strategic planning process, people can send in comments, they can email us, they can chat with us, they can visit the libraries, they can come to board meetings. We're open. We want to hear from people about their experience with the library all the time. But this is a point in time when we're trying to collect as much input as possible from the folks that we serve, to strategize about where we want to be in 5 years and how we get there. So I think that's an important element of this process. And it's worth noting as well that the consultants that we're working with and all of us in general, we want to make a specific point in this process of reaching what we call non-users. So probably if you're listening to the podcast, you use the library. I mean, you're listening to the podcast, you may well be a super user, but we really want to make a point of hearing from folks who don't use the library. Why don't you use the library? Or do our hours not work for you? Are you unaware of our services? Or is there some, anything else that you could tell us about how we could better serve you? Maybe it's just a matter of not being aware of something, but there could be other aspects as well. And so that's also a challenge because those folks may not be getting our newsletter. They may not be visiting the website for whatever reason. And so finding and reaching non-users to get their input is a special challenge and part of why we've enlisted the help of our consultants as well.
And the thing is that's advocacy. And that's advocacy. Obviously, the staff and the board take advocacy very seriously, but I'm hoping that every single one of our super users takes advocacy seriously as well, because we can only reach so many people. And that's why it's really important for you. I've had instances where we were working outside and we started talking to our neighbors and they said something and I said, well, do you know that you can check out a blood pressure machine at the library? And they looked at me like they had seen a ghost. Like, what? I was like, yeah, the library has. And then we had proceeded to have a 30-minute conversation about different services that the library provides that they didn't expect. Most people know libraries check out books. Most people even talk about ebooks and things like that. But that you can check out a violin at the library, that's something new.
Yeah, that's a good point. If your perception of the library is 10 or 20 years ago, and that's kind of when it was formed, then you may still think that we charge overdue fines, and we haven't done that since 2020. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's why I think it's incumbent on every library users to talk about it and say, why do you use the library? Hey, did you know we do this or that, or something like that?
Here's a link to this survey. Tell the library what you think.
Exactly.
And I will say that the survey will only take 5 minutes.
Yes.
So if we can just
purposefully designed to be very brief.
5 minutes of your time, because we understand time is precious, and so we want to make sure that if we are asking for your help, for your time and effort and energy, that we want to make sure it's concise and clear. That 5 minutes. That's all.
If you got more time, we'll take it, but that's all we need. 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground here, and we are also about to talk to our consultants from Broadview Planning, and they'll be able to answer some more specific questions and details about the survey itself, what it's going to look like, where they will be around our 5-county district over the next couple of months. But we'll let them explain all of that. For now, I want to thank Sarah and Mary Beth for taking the time to be here and talk about strategic planning, and for your service on the committee, which I'm also on. So thank you to me too as well.
From someone not on the committee, thank you to all of you.
You are very welcome.
Excellent.
All right, as promised, we are back via Zoom with the folks from Broadview Planning, Sarah Belz and Andrea Petzel. TRL started working with Broadview at the beginning of this year on our strategic planning process. We've been working with them up until this point, and we're just about ready to debut a community survey, which is perhaps the most important part of the strategic planning process, when we're going out and asking our community members for their direct feedback on what we do well and how we could improve over the next 5 years. So we're happy to have them here. Welcome, Andrea and Sarah. I will let you introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about what you do with Broadview as consultants, and kind of where we've been so far and where we're going in this process.
Okay, well, I can start. I'm Andrea Petzel. I'll give a little overview of who we are as a company, and then Sarah can maybe talk a little bit about the process. But I'm the principal of Broadview Planning. We're a small Seattle-based women-owned consulting company, and we do a lot of community planning and public engagement work. I'm an urban planner by training, and we were really excited to work on this project to do a little bit of strategic planning and sort of stretch how we think about strategic planning in an area that is so broad geographically and in such a unique policy area as library system. So this project really caught our eye. We're really excited to work on this. And I will let Sarah introduce herself and then maybe tell a little bit more about how we're approaching the whole engagement piece of this.
Sure. Thank you, Andrea. So I'm Sarah Belz. I'm the policy and planning manager at Broadview Planning. And yeah, just to reiterate what Andrea said, we're really excited to be working with TRL on this project. It's been a great experience for our team so far. So this is a year-long endeavor that we're involved with. Kicked it off in January, and we'll be working on it through the end of the year. Up to this point, we've been doing a lot of internal planning and coordination with TRL leadership, as well as a strategic planning committee that's comprised of TRL board members and staff to help us sort of form and guide the project over the course of the year. So a lot of what we've been doing up to this point is putting together a community engagement plan, which we are now currently in the process of operationalizing. And it's sort of a multi-faceted approach to engagement across Timberland's 5-county area. We have started doing site visits. I think we've been to 6 branches so far. We'll be going to more in the months ahead. Planning to get out to some community events this summer, do a ride along with the Anywhere Library. We're interviewing TRL staff and community partners. And then also a big part of our effort is launching a community survey, which we are gearing up to do. We have prepared an online survey. It will be translated into Spanish, Vietnamese, and Korean. It will be posted online, but paper copies will also be available at TRL branches and at events that we and TRL staff attend to meet with community members. And the idea is to collect as much input as we can from patrons, non-users, community partners, other folks that have any connection to the Timberland Regional Library System, to learn about who they are, how they use the library, how the library could serve them better, if there are things they would like to see, services they'd like to see the library offer in the future, so that we can collect all of that input to help Timberland staff and board, in partnership with us, develop a strategic direction for the library for the next 5 years.
Really answering a lot of the questions there.
Really
you just covering a lot of ground.
That's it. See you later.
No, that's great. We're talking about with Mary Beth and Sarah in the previous segment about how we're really trying to reach non-users. We obviously want to hear from library folks who use the library or probably listening to the podcast, but we really want to get out there and try and reach folks who don't use the library, maybe because they're unaware of our services or because our services don't meet their needs in some way. And so I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to what the opportunities are going to be and how you're going to attempt to reach folks who aren't using the library now and get their feedback as part of this process.
Sure. Andrea, should I take a stab at that?
Yeah, and I would just add, I think that's part of the reason why we were so drawn to this is that there is such a deep commitment to a broad community engagement, both with users and non-users. And that's can be unusual in a strategic planning process, but that we just really commend that the system wants to just get out there and talk to as many people as possible. So like Sarah said, with our engagement plan, we really have a couple of different approaches. And I think the survey and where we will be out and about with events is really how we're trying to get to some non-users and putting ourselves in places where we just meet as many different kinds of folks as possible. And I'll let Sarah tell you the nuts and bolts of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, and I would add to just with regard to connecting non-users in the survey. I mean, I think a real benefit of doing the survey, with the caveat that we completely understand that not everyone has, access, consistent access to the internet. And that is part of the reason why we'll be offering, opportunities for people to participate in the survey in different ways. But part of the advantage or the benefit of the survey is that it's very easy to distribute, right? yes, Timberland Regional Library, can send out a newsletter and post a survey on social media, but also community partners who engage with folks who may not regularly use the library can help facilitate the distribution of the survey, right? They can post it in their locations. They can distribute the survey, via their own their own distribution lists and newsletters and things like that. So I think, as Andrea said, that's part of why we're doing the in-person outreach, is to get to places where people are going to be who might not regularly be at the library. But it's also an engagement tool that can be distributed quickly and widely across a broad geographic area.
I've seen the drafts of the survey because I'm on the strategic planning committee, so I already know the answer to this, and I know that it's only supposed to take about 5 minutes to complete. But what kinds of questions, pretend I don't know, are we asking on this community survey?
Sure. So the first question we ask is whether or not the person responding to the survey is a TRL card holder. And then depending on whether or not you are a TRL card holder, you'll be sent down a different branch of the survey. So for folks that do hold a TRL library card, we ask some questions about what services they use, what services they would like to see expanded or new services they would like to see added, just to get some feedback that's specific to folks that are already using the system. And then there is a different branch of the survey for folks that don't have library cards. And so there's some questions there about collecting information about why they don't use the library. And then also there's a pretty detailed list of questions, or a table that outlines different categories of services that TRL offers. Because I think a lot of the reasons, for some people, the reason that they don't use the library is they don't know what the library offers. I mean, I think there is a misconception among a lot of people that libraries are primarily places where, you come and check out books, and that's kind of the beginning and the end of it. And that is absolutely not what a modern library is, right? I mean, there's computer labs, there's printing, there's story times, there's language learning opportunities, there's coffee hours for, seniors and veterans and, and different groups, all sorts of programming for teens. And so part of the survey component for the non-users is to also just provide some education for folks about, hey, maybe you don't use your library, but did you know that all of these services are available and offered? And then at the end of the survey for all participants, there's an optional section where we're collecting some demographic information just to kind of get a sense of who's using the library, where they're living, and also to be able to kind of map, okay, the people who aren't using it, are they not using it because they're far from a library, or are they living near a library, but they just don't know what's there, to kind of get a sense of that.
And by the time that people are listening to this episode, the survey will already be out. So if you're listening and you haven't completed the survey, now's a good time to hit pause and do that. And then at the end of this process, after we've gathered data from the community surveys and from your site visits and focus groups and interviews and things like that, how do you take all of that information that you've learned towards the end of the summer and package that and work that into a draft of the strategic plan? What does that process look like for you, as you're doing a lot of the heavy lifting there? You're hearing from us and from our communities, the folks that we serve, and then you get a big project of kind of putting this all into a coherent package. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is looking for themes, and it's really on us to it'll be a pretty heavy lift of qualitative research to just get in there. Survey makes it easier because you can slice data and look at, like Sarah said, different, everybody who lives in this county answered this. Some of the open-ended questions are a little more challenging, and we'll just have to do some thematic analysis. And I think fold it in with what we're hearing from interviews, both with staff and out and about in the community. And then I think the packaging is what we present to the strategic planning committee, and what we've learned versus what we think through the whole strategic planning process, the direction that the library system wants to go, and like, how do you marry the two? And that's a little bit more of an art. So it's presenting it and working through some of the feedback that we get with all of you, and kind of just trying to marry those two things together and come up with the new strategic direction, or just simply do a couple tweaks to the existing strategic direction. It's hard to know right now.
Big task.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of fun. Like, it's really interesting to see the themes that come up that you see. I think we would say we're already hearing a couple of common themes. And so it'll be interesting to see, if what we've heard from staff and site visits is reflected in the survey from more of the users. So we'll see.
Do you have anything else you wanted to ask? We covered a lot of ground here.
We did. You made it sound very interesting, though. I appreciated everything that you were saying about how interesting that can actually be to get all that information, and how insightful that can be in moving whatever planning that you're doing forward for the strategic plan.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I really like about surveys is, you have to be careful about interpreting what you hear, right? It goes through the lens of our own bias and our own language and everything else that you bring to the table as a consultant. So the survey does give it a chance for people to use their own words. And so that is the other part of the whole effort, is to how can you most accurately reflect thematically what you're hearing from everybody across all 5 counties and staff and, users and non-users. So just taking the time to be thoughtful and reflective and just say, okay, this is what we heard. This is what we're bringing to the table. What's the purest form of communication that we're hearing from folks that helps you all to make the decisions that you need to make? So it's challenging, but it's super interesting.
That's what I've found helpful about working with all of you so far, is that, when we're trying to have these conversations, we're library people, we surround ourselves with library people. It's easy to get into a bubble. So it's nice to work with folks who can hear from the community and hear from staff, and help us kind of get outside of ourselves as we're going through this planning process, so that we're not just hearing from, people who already are using the library, love the library. So we appreciate what you've done so far, and we're looking forward to the results of the community survey.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great point, is that people engage with us very differently than they engage with all of you. And neither one better or worse, but there's a little bit of distance between us as consultants and the community. So I think we hear things a little bit differently. And so it's really interesting to bring to you all what we've heard and have your interpretation of it, and just see where it all takes us.
Yeah, I think another thing, another element of this project that I think makes it challenging, but also interesting and kind of an opportunity for creativity. Just for context, Andrea and I both have experience in government, like both worked in government for many years. Now we're consulting. A lot of our clients are public entities. And, I think we have an understanding and a lot of experience, working in situations where, there's finite resources, right? And, it's like you want to do more, you want to provide more services, but you only have the resources that you have. And so I think sort of an interesting, creative challenge associated with this project is, putting together a strategic plan and kind of looking forward 5 years and thinking, okay, this is what we're hearing from community. This is what we're hearing from TRL leadership. These are the resources that are available. How do we think creatively about how to move the agency forward, over the next 5 years?
Couldn't have said that better myself. Well, I think we can wrap it up here. We've covered a lot of ground. We appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast with us. I know that you didn't necessarily know that you were signing up to be on a podcast when you started working with TRL, but we do appreciate you taking the time to do it. Did a great job. So
well done.
I like to say that the public and public library means you, and we can't do this without you, so we really want to hear your feedback. Thank you for joining us on today's episode. Don't forget to follow or subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners.
You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Timberland Library. If you have any questions or comments, you can email us at trlpodcast@trl.org.
Original music is by our very own librarian and talented musician, Stefan, at the Yelm Branch.
Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep the conversation going. Thank you for being a part of the TRL community.